You are watching the Walkertown Report.
Today I will be comparing and contrasting two movies. One, the iconic Catherine Deneuve in Belle de Jour, and contrasting it with V the Hot One, which was made not that long afterwards, which is pretty much the American version of Belle de Jour. Both of these movies feature women who are very well off, who are pampered, spoiled, and for whatever reason decide that maybe they missed out on life, or they just have a hankering and they go down and try to experience what life is like as a prostitute. Okay, so here's what really happens. Of course, in Belle de Jour, Catherine Deneuve has her husband's employer, who is a wild and swinging playboy type who makes unnecessary moves on her that she does not want, and then he spills the beans that there is a house of prostitution nearby, and of course her husband also explains how one of his first encounters was with a prostitute. So she becomes intrigued with this house of prostitution and goes to visit it, and why stop there? She takes a job. And of course the real question is why? How is she motivated? Now, in the American version of this, which of course would be V the Hot One, we have Annette Haven, who of course lives in a very well-to-do house, late 60s, early 70s. It's a pretty swinging time there, as you know. And like Catherine Deneuve, she has a kind of a weak-willed husband who, both husbands in both movies, are quite submissive. She too talks to her husband about how he found out about sex, what his first experience was, and of course, yes indeed, it was also with a house of prostitution, and so she decides to check that place out. And the difference in the two is that Valerie, of V the Hot One, goes to the house of prostitution. It's not the first place she goes to. She's actually seems to be motivated by some inner repressed sexuality, and she makes a move on her husband's best friend, and then has a little episode in an adult movie theater and nearly gets thrown out of that, and tries to have her own encounter with somebody that she met on the street. So all this happens before she goes directly to the prostitution place. So that tells me there's something else going on in her mind, as opposed to Catherine Deneuve, whose character is Severin, who just goes straight to the house of prostitution. In any event, Annette Haven winds up working there, and like Catherine Deneuve, encounters many unusual personalities. And then, of course, both of them eventually encounter the creepy male that they met in the course of their duties, who developed a little bit of an obsession with them. With Catherine Deneuve, that would be Marcel, a customer who's involved in the underworld, who becomes a little bit more attractive than a customer should, and eventually winds up shooting her husband. She now has control over her husband. And the movie ends, of course, with her exerting that control, and she's pretty much now in the dominant position. And of course, with Valerie in V the Hot One, in her case, it's not a customer, just some guy who keeps leering at her from a park. And then every time she sees him, she hears this eerie music box type music. And the next thing you know, she eventually goes back with him. And what does he do? Steals her purse. So now she has no money, no cards, nothing. And she's in the middle of downtown San Francisco. So this is not a woman necessarily who's attained power over her husband yet, but then when she calls up her husband, she suddenly decides that she doesn't want him to come to her help, that she doesn't want to become rescued. And at that point, she hangs up the phone and she's there by herself. Now, this is also remarkably different from Catherine Deneuve Severin, because I get the impression that Valerie in this movie is like the old 70s song goes, "I've been to paradise, but I've never been to me." This is more about self-realization with V the Hot One. Belle de Jour was directed by Luis Bunuel of Un Chien Andalou. And V the Hot One was directed by Robert McCallum, who actually had the reputation of, at one time, being the right hand of Orson Welles. Now, Belle de Jour is not that difficult to get. That one you can find at Amazon.com, or you can get it from Netflix like I did. But V the Hot One might be a little difficult to get, and I got my copy from VCX Limited. You can find the link in the description. It's worth checking out. Belle de Jour, Netflix, and of course, V the Hot One.